If your parents emptied your college savings account to fund your brother's MBA, then told you that women don't need expensive degrees to have good lives, would you hire him 8 years later when he walked into your conference room not knowing who you were? My name is Rachel, and the answer to that question changed everything about how my family saw me, and more importantly, how I finally saw myself. I need to tell you something before we get into this. I'm not a naturally angry person. I don't hold grudges easily. I've always been the one in the family who smoothed things over, who found the silver lining, who kept the peace at Thanksgiving even when it cost me. So when I tell you what my parents did, I need you to understand that it took me years to even call it what it was. Unfair, deliberate. A choice they made with full awareness of what it would cost me. Let me take you back to the summer I turned 17. My brother is 3 years older than me. My parents never tried to hide their preference for him. It was just the architecture of our family, as natural and unquestioned as the layout of our house. His room was bigger, his curfew was later. His failures were explained away with phrases like, "Boys will be boys," and "he's just finding himself." My achievements were met with a particular kind of silence that I spent years misreading as indifference before I finally understood it was something closer to resentment. My father ran a small manufacturing company outside of Columbus, Ohio. My mother taught piano lessons to the neighborhood kids and managed the household with the kind of cheerful efficiency that looked like contentment from the outside. We were comfortable. Not wealthy, but comfortable. There was a college savings account. I knew about it because my father mentioned it exactly once, when I was 14, during a dinner where I'd announced I wanted to study computer science. He'd said, "Good thing we've been putting money away." That was the last time it came up. My brother had a different relationship with money. He borrowed it constantly and repaid it rarely. He changed his major 4 times in 6 years, accumulating credit hours toward degrees he never finished. My parents never cut him off. Each new direction was treated as a sign of his range, his potential, his refusal to be boxed in. I watched this pattern from the outside and worked harder in response to it, the way you sometimes do when you're young and still believe effort is the currency that actually matters in your own home. When my acceptance letter arrived from the University of Michigan, I sat at the kitchen table with it for a long time before I showed anyone. Computer science, full academic program, one of the best in the country. I had earned a partial merit scholarship. With the savings account and some loans, we could make it work. I had already run the numbers 3 different ways. My mother read the letter and handed it back without expression. My father came home that evening and I showed it to him at dinner. He set down his fork, which I remember clearly because it made a particular sound against the ceramic plate, and he said, "We need to talk about the money." The savings account was gone. My brother had needed it. His program, a 2-year MBA at a private university in Boston, cost more than they had anticipated. There had been additional expenses. An apartment, because he couldn't manage the dormitory environment. A car, because Boston winters were brutal and the tea was unreliable. Professional clothes for internships. Networking dinners. They had spent the last of it 8 months earlier, fully intending to rebuild it before I needed it. Except that rebuilding had not happened because my brother had also needed help with his credit card debt, and then my father's company had a slow quarter, and the timing had just never been right. I sat there and did the math in real time. They had taken money that existed for both of us and given all of it to him. Not some of it, all of it. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. She said, "Sweetheart, honestly, for what you want to do, you don't really need Michigan. There are perfectly good state schools that cost a fraction of the price. And between us, computer science is such a male-dominated field. You're going to have a harder road there than in something more suited to your strengths." I asked what my strengths were. She thought about it. "You're great with people," she said. "You're empathetic. Have you considered education? Or maybe nursing?" My father nodded along to this. "We just think you'd be happier in something more realistic, Rachel. Your brother had a specific vision. He knew exactly where he was going. You're still figuring things out." I was not still figuring things out. I had known what I wanted since I was 13 years old. I had been coding since I was 15. I had already built 2 small applications that were live, actually used by actual people, one of them a scheduling tool for a local youth soccer league that had 300 active users. I did not say any of this. I folded my acceptance letter back into its envelope, thanked them for dinner, and went upstairs to my room. That night I cried for about 40 minutes, and then I stopped, because crying was not going to change the math. I deferred Michigan for 1 year, got a job at a tech company doing entry-level QA testing, and started saving. I also started teaching myself everything the university would have taught me, through online courses, through open-source projects, through forums and documentation, and the particular kind of education you get when you simply refuse to stop working. I was not romantic about it. It was not some inspiring montage. It was exhausting, lonely, and frequently humiliating, especially in the early months when I was surrounded by men who had been handed every resource I had been denied, who nevertheless treated their mediocrity as evidence of their potential. Have you ever been told that the opportunities given to someone else were just their hard work paying off, while your actual hard work was explained away as luck? Drop something in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this is already hitting close to home, please subscribe. I tell these stories because the people in them deserve to be seen. Here is what my brother was doing during the years I was building myself in silence. He graduated with his MBA. My parents threw a party. I attended, smiled, helped my mother with the dishes. He got a job at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. He called home every Sunday, sent my parents photos from client dinners and team offsites, posted on LinkedIn about thought leadership and synergy with enough frequency that he had become a kind of ambient presence in our family's imagination of success. My mother forwarded me his posts sometimes. "Look what your brother is up to," she would write. No message after that, just the link. I moved to San Francisco at 22, with savings and a laptop that had a cracked corner on the screen, and a job offer from a startup that was building infrastructure software for healthcare networks. The salary was enough to split a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 other women in the outer Sunset neighborhood. I worked 12-hour days, learned faster than I had ever learned anything, and within 18 months had been promoted twice. My manager told me I had an unusual ability to see the full system, not just the component I was assigned to. I started leading projects. I started building a team. I called home occasionally. My father asked how San Francisco weather compared to Ohio. My mother asked if I was eating enough. Neither of them asked what I was working on. My brother, during this period, had left his consulting firm after what he described as a toxic environment and spent 8 months between jobs. My parents paid his rent during that stretch. I know this because my father mentioned it casually during one of our calls. The way you mention something you expect the other person to already understand is normal. We're helping him bridge the gap, he said. He's in a tough spot. I thought about the tough spot I had been in at 17, when the money that was supposed to be mine was spent. I did not say this. I said, "That's kind of you," and changed the subject. My brother eventually landed at another firm, then another. Each transition was presented to the family as a strategic move, an upgrade, a better opportunity. His LinkedIn title changed regularly: Senior Consultant, Strategy Lead, Director of Client Solutions. I never verified any of it. I had enough to focus on. I met my business partner, Diane, at a conference in Austin when I was 26. She was building a company called Lattice Bridge that developed workforce analytics software, specifically tools that helped large organizations identify and reduce operational inefficiencies. The technology was genuinely good. The market was ready. What she needed was someone who could build the engineering team and own the technical architecture. She looked at my portfolio for 20 minutes and offered me the CTO role on the spot. I said yes, before she finished the sentence. We spent 2 years building. The product worked. The clients stayed and grew. We raised a Series A, then a Series B. I hired 42 engineers, built a culture I was proud of, and watched our platform get used by over 300 enterprise clients across 9 industries. I was 31 years old when we were featured in Forbes. I did not send the article home. There was a moment, around that time, when I let myself look at the distance between where I was and where I'd started. The crack-cornered laptop, the shared apartment, the night I ate gas station food for 3 days because I'd miscalculated a bill payment and couldn't access my account until the weekend. The phone calls home where I was never once asked what I was building. Diane asked me once why I never talked about my family. I told her the short version. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Some parents invest in their children, and some parents just spend money on them. The ones who spent it on your brother were never actually investing. They were just spending on the one they thought was safer." I thought about that for a long time. The email from my mother arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in back-to-back meetings and didn't read it until after 7 in the evening when I finally sat down with a cold cup of coffee and opened my phone. She wrote that my brother was going through another transition. The firm he'd been at for the past 2 years had restructured, and his position had been eliminated. He was looking at new opportunities. He had applied to a number of companies, including one that she understood was in my general industry, and she wanted to let me know in case I heard anything, and also to say that he was really trying. "Rachel, he just needs a door to open." I read the email twice. Then I opened our applicant tracking system and searched his name. He had applied to Lattice Bridge 6 days earlier for a Director of Enterprise Partnerships role. The application had already cleared our initial screening. His resume was polished. His experience looked reasonable on paper. He had not mentioned, anywhere in his application materials, that he had a sister who was the CTO of the company he was applying to. I sat with that for a long time. Diane called me 10 minutes later, because our recruiting coordinator had flagged a potential conflict and looped her in. "Did you know about this?" she asked. I told her I had just found out. She asked what I wanted to do. Here is what I did not do. I did not call my mother back. I did not email my brother to warn him. I did not quietly remove his application or quietly advance it. I recused myself from his hiring process formally and completely, drafted a brief disclosure memo for our HR lead, and told Diane to run his interview through standard channels with the panel that handled all senior hires. If he was qualified, they would find that. If he wasn't, they would find that too. His first-round interview was scheduled for the following Thursday. I had no intention of being in the building. Then his hiring manager, a woman named Priya, who led our partnerships team, sent me a note on Wednesday evening. She said she had completed her preparation review of his application and had some concerns she wanted to walk through with me before the interview, given the flag on the file. She was not asking me to intervene. She was doing exactly what a good manager does, which is surface concerns early. I met with her Thursday morning before his interview was scheduled to begin. Priya had done thorough work. She had verified his employment history through standard background procedures. The titles on his resume did not align consistently with the roles on file at 2 of his former employers. One company listed him as having left after 11 months rather than the 22 months his resume claimed. Another showed his title as Associate Director rather than the Senior Director he had listed. His LinkedIn showed a current role at a company called Harrington Strategic Advisors. When Priya searched for the company, she found a one-page website with no client list, no team page, and a registration date of 4 months earlier. I looked at her notes for a long time. He was scheduled to arrive in 45 minutes. Priya asked me again if I wanted to recuse myself entirely or if I wanted to be available in an advisory capacity. I made a decision I had not planned to make. I told her I would sit in, not as the decision-maker, not to protect him, and not to hurt him, but because I had spent 8 years building something that I was not going to allow to be compromised by someone who believed that being related to me was a credential. I was in the conference room when he walked in. He had not changed much. A little heavier, a little more deliberate in the way he moved. The way people get when they've been performing authority for long enough that it starts to feel like posture. He was wearing a suit that was good quality but slightly wrong for San Francisco, more Chicago boardroom than West Coast tech, which told me he had not done enough research on the company culture. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He looked confident. He looked like someone who expected this to go well. He stopped when he saw me. The conference room had 4 people in it. Priya, our head of HR, whose name was Tomas, a senior partnerships manager named Kelsey, who was part of the evaluation panel, and me. My brother stood in the doorway and looked at me and said, "Rachel." I said, "Hello." I introduced myself the way I introduce myself in every professional setting. Rachel Cole, Chief Technology Officer, Lattice Bridge. I gestured toward the chair across from the panel. "Please sit down. We're glad you came in." He sat. He was reassembling himself in real time. I could see it happening, the recalibration, the attempt to determine what this meant, whether this was a gift or a trap, whether I was here to help him or to observe what happened when no one helped him at all. Priya led the interview. She was professional and precise. She asked him about specific enterprise deals he had closed and the metrics that defined their success. He gave answers that were confident and general, the kind of answers that work when nobody presses on the specifics. Priya pressed on the specifics. She asked him to walk her through one deal in detail: timeline, stakeholders, obstacles, outcome. She asked him to quantify what his contribution had been versus the team's contribution. He started to talk and then stopped. He restarted. The answer became circular. He mentioned a client in the financial services sector. Priya asked the client's name. He said he couldn't share that for confidentiality reasons, which is a reasonable answer. So she asked him to describe the client's challenge and how his solution addressed it technically. He could not do this. He used the word synergy 4 times in 6 minutes. Tomas asked about the gap between 2 of his roles, a 9-month gap that was not accounted for on his resume. My brother said he had been consulting independently during that period. Tomas asked for the names of any clients he had served. He gave one name, a company I recognized as a friend of his from college, who ran a small landscaping business. He said they had engaged him for strategic advisory services. Kelsey asked about his current role at Harrington Strategic Advisors. She asked about the company's client base, its structure, its primary service offerings. He described it in terms so vague they had no specific content. When Kelsey asked how many full-time employees the company had, he said, "We're lean and agile." She asked again. He said the number fluctuated. There was a silence in the room. He looked at me. I looked back at him without expression, the way you learn to do in board meetings when you need to hold a position without escalating it. He said, "Rachel, I want to just be upfront about something." He said, "I know this is an unusual situation. I applied here because I genuinely think I can contribute. I didn't mention that you worked here because I didn't want it to look like I was trading on the relationship. I wanted to earn this on my own terms." Priya said, "We appreciate that." The interview continued for another 12 minutes. When he left, Tomas closed the door, and the 4 of us sat there for a moment. Priya said, "I think we all saw what we needed to see." I said yes. And then I said something I had not planned to say, but that felt true in the moment. I said, "For what it's worth, I've recused myself from this decision entirely. Whatever you determine is right for this role and this company, I support it. He's not here because of me, and he's not getting in or kept out because of me. You run this the way you would run it for anyone." They did. He did not get the offer. Priya sent him a professional rejection email 2 days later, citing the need for more specific enterprise experience and a closer alignment between his background and the technical requirements of the role. He called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. Then my mother called. I answered. She did not ask how I was. She said, "What happened?" I told her I had been present at his interview as an observer and had recused myself from the decision. I told her the panel had made their assessment independently. I told her I had no part in the outcome. She said, "Rachel, he's your brother." I said, "Yes." She said, "You could have helped him." I said, "My job is to protect this company and the people who work here. I didn't make the hiring decision. I made sure it was fair." She said, "Fair." She said the word the way you say something you think is naive or beside the point. She said, "Your father and I have always been there for him. We supported him through every hard stretch. That's what family does." I said, "You spent my college savings on him without telling me. I found out at the dinner table when I was 17, and then you told me I didn't need an education in the field I'd been working toward for years, because women don't do well there. I built what I built without any of that support. And I did it without asking him to be removed from a list, or asking for a door to be opened, or expecting anyone to smooth the path because of a relationship." There was a long silence. My mother said, "We made hard choices. We did what we thought was best at the time." I said, "I know. I understand that. But understanding it doesn't mean the consequence was fair." She said, "Are you really still holding on to this after all these years?" I said, "I'm not holding on to anything. I let go of it a long time ago. That's actually the point." She hung up. Have you ever had the moment where you finally say the thing you've been quietly carrying for years, and instead of feeling lighter, you just feel tired? Share it in the comments. You're not alone. If this is resonating with you, hit that like button and subscribe. These stories exist because they're real, and because somebody needs to hear theirs reflected back. My father called the next morning. He was calmer than my mother, which was not the same as being kind. He said, "You embarrassed your brother. In a professional setting, where people know who you are." I said. I sat in an interview room and said nothing. The panel evaluated him on his own merits. He said, "You knew they would reject him. You could have warned him, coached him, helped him prepare. That's what having a sister in a senior position at a company is worth. You wasted it." I said, "I think we have different definitions of what help looks like." He said, "You always did." He meant it as an insult. I took a breath and realized, somewhere in the architecture of that statement, that he was right, and that being right about it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. 3 weeks after the interview, Priya hired a woman named Morgan for the Director of Enterprise Partnerships role. Morgan had spent 6 years in healthcare technology sales, had closed 14 enterprise contracts in her last role, and could describe every one of them in specific detail with specific numbers. On her first week, she brought in a lead that eventually became our largest contract of the quarter. I thought about what good hiring looks like. I thought about what it costs a company when someone is placed in a role because of who they know rather than what they can do. I thought about a 17-year-old girl doing the math at a kitchen table. My brother sent me a text 4 months after the interview. No greeting, no setup. Just, "Mom says you've been offered some kind of award. Good for you." There was a feature in a business publication. I had been named to a list of top women in enterprise technology. There was a photo of me and Diane in our San Francisco office. Someone in my family had seen it. I wrote back, "Thank you. That was all." He wrote, "Must be nice to have everything work out." I thought about the cracked laptop, the gas station food, the years of building in silence while his failures were financed and mine were predicted. I thought about the specific cruelty of being told you don't need education in your chosen field, not because it wasn't true, but because the person saying it wanted a reason not to invest in you. I wrote, "It didn't just work out. I built it." He didn't respond. There is a particular freedom in removing yourself from a competition you were enrolled in without your consent. I spent years trying to prove something to people who had already decided my value. The moment I stopped measuring myself against their expectations, something shifted. I stopped needing them to see what I had built. I stopped wanting their acknowledgement. The success became mine in a way it couldn't have been when I was still waiting for them to notice it. My parents eventually reached out about the publication piece. My mother sent an email that was warm in a way that felt recent, as if the warmth had been recently applied. She said she was proud of me. She said she always knew I was capable. She said the family would love to get together soon. I read the email several times, trying to locate the version of myself that used to need this. She had grown up and moved away, and I did not miss her the way I expected to. I wrote back a short reply. I said thank you. I said I hoped they were well. I said I was very busy but would reach out when things calmed down. I did not say when I thought things might calm down. Diane and I celebrated our Series C closing that November with the team. 47 people in a rooftop bar in Soma, people who had built the thing with me, who had shown up every day and made it real. Diane gave a speech. She mentioned, as she sometimes does, that I had joined the company when it was a deck and a shared vision, and had turned it into infrastructure that touched real lives in real hospitals and real companies across the country. I thought about my father's words. Some investments pay off, others don't. I had been the investment they declined to make. I had made it myself. There is a kind of clarity that comes from building something without a safety net. You learn quickly what is real and what is performance. You learn to tell the difference between someone who believes in you and someone who will believe in you once you've already succeeded, because at that point believing costs them nothing. The people who showed up before the story was a good one. Those are the ones who matter. My real family is the one I've chosen. Diane, who called me on a random Thursday to ask how I was doing, and actually waited for the answer. Priya, who runs the tightest team I've ever managed. Tomas, who handles the hard calls with integrity every time. The engineers I've hired and mentored and watched grow into people who are better at their jobs than I was at theirs when I started. Marcus, my partner in the non-work portion of my life, who has never once suggested that what I do is too much, or too serious, or too ambitious. His mother said to me once, "The family you choose is the one you deserve." I have thought about that often. To anyone watching this who is in the early part of the story, before the Series A and the Forbes feature and the teams of people who trust you, I want to say something directly. The part where you're building in silence, where no one at home is asking what you're working on, where the people who were supposed to invest in you put their money elsewhere and told you to be realistic, that part is not the point of the story. That part is the foundation. Everything that gets built on top of it is sturdier because of what it cost. Your worth was not determined by their arithmetic. Their refusal to fund you was not a verdict on your potential. It was a verdict on their vision, which turned out to be limited. Build the thing anyway. Choose the people who choose you. And when someone who spent years explaining why you wouldn't make it walks into a room where you're the one who decides whether they do, handle it with integrity. That's the only revenge that leaves you clean. If you've ever had to build something without the foundation your family should have given you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Your story matters, and so does the person you've become because of it. Subscribe if this reached you. Share it if you know someone who needs it. I'll see you in the next one.